What terrifying confession has someone told you while intoxicated? I was at a bar one night in an affluent town. An old guy next to me started talking about his sailing days. He had a 60-foot sailboat and used to sail all over North and South America. His story was from the mid-1980s. He said one night he was anchored near an island off the coast of Venezuela. He was with his girlfriend and they had just fallen asleep when he heard a bump. At first, he didn't think much of it, barely noticed it, but decided to check it out. He left the sleeping berth and, like in most sailboats, there are a set of steep stairs to climb to get from the cabin to the aft deck. He said he always kept a pistol holstered and hanging from the side of the stair rail. As an afterthought, he grabbed his pistol as he was climbing the stairs. Once he was about halfway out on deck, he saw a man coming over the railing with an automatic weapon, like an assault rifle, AR-15 or something like that. He said he put 2 rounds into the guy and he fell back over the railing. He said that pirate activity was not unheard of around there, and people like this would board your boat, tie you up and take everything. Then they would torch the boat with you on it. The bump he had heard was the other boat coming up beside his boat. He said that was his last visit to South America, not 100% sure if the man was drunk or just needing to get it off his chest. Years ago I waited tables in a family Italian restaurant. A family of 12 came in, had wine, appetizers, dinner and dessert. After the dinner, the eldest man at the table pulled me aside and asked to pay. We walked over to the register. He says thank you, the service and food were great. Ends up tipping around 40%. I was blown away. Said thank you probably 20 times. Anyway, he waited till no one else was around. He leans close and says I was Special Forces in Vietnam. I had over 300 confirmed kills. In one instance I had 50 kills in one mission holding off enemy forces. We did some really sadistic shit over there. I've never told anyone about this. I was just so stunned by the randomness, and frankly causal way he said it. I couldn't even think of anything to say, so I blurted out a forced thank you for your service, with an awkward shoulder pat. About 5 years ago my brother had his girlfriend sleeping over at our house, because we'd had a family game night and been partying. I should interject here and say that not a single one of my family really ever liked this girl, and to all appearances she had no love for us either. She was extremely antisocial, hardly ever even said hello to any of us when she came over, and her and my brother would spend all of their time up in his room. Anyways, that night they had both come down and socialized, and we had all been drinking quite a lot. Everyone left and my parents went to bed. But I was still up around 3 a.m. and sitting downstairs watching TV and getting stoned when she walked down in a t-shirt and her underwear. She walked out to the kitchen like it was nothing, and I got a good glimpse of a thigh as she walked by and saw a long row of 1-inch marks down the length of the thigh. I thought for sure she'd hurry back up as soon as she was done in the kitchen, but to my surprise she plopped down on the floor and started talking like we were good friends. I got an earful to be sure. But the most shocking things I heard were that one of her uncles had her when she was 11 or 12 and others had molested her, and she'd been self-harming since. She was around 22 at the time of the conversation, so about 10 years worth of self-harm. She showed me all of the scars she had, down her thigh and her arms. She also said that since she had started dating my brother, she hadn't harmed herself and was happy. I realized that her being antisocial had nothing to do with us, and was as nice as possible to her from then on. They did break up later, but I'll always remember that little convo, freshman year of college. Among all the new friends I made that year, there was one guy who was always a goofball. Very laid back, casual, down for whatever. The biggest red flag we got from him was that whenever people were drinking and hanging out, he would always essentially black out. He drank way too much and would kind of spaghetti noodle his way around the party. While also intoxicated, after the party had winded down one night, a few people and I asked him why he always goes so damn hard. While drooping his head a ton, sloshing around, and slurring everything, he told us about how a few months ago, the summer before college started, his best friend called him. They lived in a small town by the beach, and his friend asked him to come meet him to watch the sunset by the water. He biked over there, sat down, and they talked for a while. Everything seemed fine. Then his friend took out a pistol and shot himself in the head, killing himself instantly. Apparently my friend had to call the police while covered in blood, brains, and skull fragments, just totally in shock. And then a few weeks later he went off to college a few states away, still in shock and unable to sleep or focus on anything. He didn't remember telling us that story, and I don't think any of us wanted to bring it up. His drinking habits didn't change until he was about to graduate, by which point he started going to therapy, got a job right after graduation, and seems to be doing better in the years since, thank God. A friend of mine likes to drink, a lot. But he knows he has a limit because when he goes over it he becomes very talkative. He also doesn't date, at all. And for a long time we all wondered why. He's a good-looking guy. He's really nice. He's fun to be around, when he isn't drinking. Anyway, never wants to date. Well, one time he got absolutely shit-faced and I found out why. It turns out that when we was a kid, he saw his aunt murder his uncle in cold blood. Ever since, he's been terrified of being alone with a woman, and feels like he could never truly be safe around them. Playing truth or dare at a party with close friends, our lesbian friend of 8 years chooses truth. Other friend asks her, jokingly, if she's ever sucked it. Everyone's laughing. She isn't. She admits to being raped by her uncle for 4 years as a child. Friend who asked starts crying. He had no idea. None of us did. They didn't tell me this while they were drunk. But I think it fits here. I am a volunteer at a nursing home. When one of the female residents was close to death, she confided in me this. One time her husband cheated on her with the neighbor's wife. When the neighbor's husband found out, he was very upset and was going to physically hurt her husband. They worked out a deal where the neighbor's husband would not hurt her husband if he was able to return the favor. In essence, her husband agreed to let the neighbor have her in order to save himself a righteous beating. It gets worse. She later became pregnant and told her husband for the rest of his life that it was his, but she honestly believed it to be the neighbor's. Her whole life she was carrying this burden about her son and what her husband had done to her, both with the cheating on her and with the trading her off like a cow. It was truly a heartbreaking conversation. Was chilling with an older dude with whom I recently started working as a butcher in a grocery store. A couple of beers down and he starts telling me he's been in prison for 17 years. Came out 2 years ago and it's his first ever job at 64 years old. I got curious and asked him what happened if it wasn't too private. Without hesitation, he simply answered, I cut him down with an axe, this piece of shit. And now he's a butcher. Dude must really like his job, I guess. LMAO. Find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life. One time, an old acquaintance, F49, and I, M32, were drinking late into the night. She drank much faster than me, and before long randomly and drunkenly confessed to me the following. When her aging and sick mother, whom she despised and was a ton of unappreciated work to care for, was left in her care, she intentionally withheld certain medications, and gave her too much of other ones with the plan being to kill her off. It worked. She told her other siblings that the illness must have finally gotten to her, and she passed in her sleep. Since she was already old and sick, there was no autopsy. A minute later she snapped out of it and apologized profusely for telling me that, adding that I am the only person she has ever told. My parents finally fessed up that they had another child, who died before me and my twin sister were born. This in itself wasn't exactly terrifying, because unfortunately that does happen sometimes. What made it so terrifying was the fact that my sister and I knew, yet for our whole lives her parents had convinced us we were misremembering. I'm not sure how we knew. Our brother died a year before we were born, and we've never met him. There are 0 pictures of him. He was never mentioned. Our parents, and the rest of our family, collectively forgot about him, and I have to mention that this is totally in line with our family. They will just close ranks and forget absolutely everything they don't want to acknowledge. Yet somehow, from a very early age, my sister and I told everyone we had a brother. Lots of our school friends were aware of our brother. When it was finally revealed that it was just the 2 of us, our friends gave us shit for lying. But my sister and I were just genuinely confused because we knew it was true. Many times over the years, we confronted our parents about it. Every single time, they lied to us. They promised we never had any other siblings. They swore up and down we were just confused. Then one day when they were both drunk, we overheard them talking about him and ran down to call them on it, and they finally confessed. This still doesn't explain how we knew. I can only imagine we must have heard or seen something when we were very young, and just don't consciously remember. But it's fucked up beyond belief that the entire family lied to us for 16 years. We even remembered his name. The most terrifying thing of all is the fact that my sister and I still think they're lying. Both of us have a distinct memory of playing with a slightly older boy when we were very young, and both of us remember thinking of him as our older brother within the context of the memory. I was sitting at home when a friend of mine came over shit-faced. She staggered in and sat down on the couch a few feet from me. She told me something completely fucked up. When I was 17, my stepdad was drunk and tried to have sex with me because I looked like his dead wife. He kept calling me Abigail and just wouldn't let go of me. He kept saying he missed her and that he loves her, but knew she'd never come back. He said I reminded him of her to the point he couldn't help himself. That's why I never talk about guest stuff with you guys. I lost my virginity out of pity, and it left me with so much mental and emotional damage. She started crying after that, but I had no idea what to do or say. I was stunned. Then it hit me how she doesn't talk about her stepdad when asked about her family. She said I'm the only one that knows about any of this. I was at a bar with a kitchen coworker. He'd apparently been stabbed in some kind of altercation some years ago. Never asked him specifically what it was about, but he struck me as kind of a hippie-ish type dude, into fish and widespread panic and such. Seemed like a mild-mannered stoner, so I assumed it had just been some guys messing with him and it escalated further, though I didn't know for sure. This night at the bar, a few shots in, he told me that after the stabbing, while he was in the hospital, his older sister had found the attackers, and that they weren't alive anymore or something to that effect. Went on about how dangerous his sister was and how she was connected to some scary people. The guy actually died a few months ago, out of the blue, from what was said to be a stroke. He was only 38 at the time of his death. He'd been gone from the restaurant we worked at for some time, got let go for drinking on the job. I assume it was just a random thing. Or maybe he had undisclosed health issues, but still odd. He was an interesting guy. Had a former friend tell me he killed his brother. Didn't help this was while we were trying to herd his drunk ass to the car, as he was crying and yelling it at the top of his lungs. Amazing we didn't end up in cuffs or the very least get stopped and questioned. Come to find out his brother died of a brain aneurysm, and that morning, he prayed for something to happen to get him out of school that day. He always blamed himself for his brother's death, and I get that to a degree. I've told this story before, and it is one I don't expect anyone to believe, but I don't care who believes what. I was there, and I know it went down. Anyway, I had a friend in high school who had a younger brother I was also friends with, and who also attended the same school. The three of us, sometimes with others, would often meet in the bathroom directly across from the administrative office to smoke cigarettes first thing in the morning. For whatever reason, the teachers and admins never looked in that bathroom for smokers. So we're in the bathroom that day, and the older of my two friends said that he had just gotten a new video game. I think it was an Aliens on Jaguar or something along those lines. He was talking about how fun it was, and I asked if I could come over that night and play it. He said, "Fuck this. Why wait? Let's go play it now." My parents would have given me a lecture or something, and they rarely answered the phone. There was a high probability that I could just skip school and my parents would never know. His dad would beat his and his brother's asses if they skipped school. He wouldn't be home until late, so going to their house wasn't an issue, but they had to make sure no one called their father when they didn't show up to homeroom. So they went to the admin office and told them that their aunt had just died and they needed to go home. They said their dad was on the way to pick them up. Everything went smooth as could be, and we headed out toward his house. We were about halfway to his house when a car pulls up on us like it is trying to run us over. It's their dad. He's fucking fuming. He says, "Your aunt just died and I've been looking everywhere for you. Get in the fucking car." We all thought that maybe the school did call, left a message offering condolences or something, and he just didn't know it was all a lie. So the younger of my friends says, "Dad, we just told them that so they wouldn't call you." He says, "I know what you did, and now my sister is dead. I hope you're happy." I still thought for sure he was just trying to teach them a lesson or something. But no. She actually died. Despite being the beat his kids for doing dumb shit kind of dude, he was as much a friend to all of us as his kids were. So later, I heard his side of the story. He called the school to tell them he would be picking them up because their aunt just died, and they said something like, "Oh yes." They already informed us of everything. They'll be waiting out front for you. He had just found out himself from their grandmother, who definitely did not call the school. So he was a little confused, but decided to figure that out later and went to pick them up. When he got to the school, he didn't see them. So he walked around the building, then went in and asked them to call them over the PA, all while stressing out about his sister having just died. Then he realized. Asses were beat? They blame themselves to this day. I am pretty sure their dad does too. My great-grandfather was in World War II. He never ever spoke of it. If you asked him about it, he would politely get up, grab his drink, and go somewhere else. After my first deployment to Afghanistan, he called me and said, I can finally talk to someone. I started hanging out with him all the time. I would tell him stories and he would tell me some. When I went on leave, we had a night where me and him were going drink for drink. After a while, he tells me about a time when him and his unit found a small concentration camp. They aren't all big like Auschwitz. He said the first thing he remembers was the smell. He said the smell was so bad he almost threw up a handful of times. So this camp didn't have ovens or a gas chamber. When they went through the north side of the camp was a pit they had dug out. Inside the pit must have been thousands of decaying bodies. He said he was sure that the ones on the bottom were probably skeletons. When they talked to the people, they said the Nazis would line people at random and shoot them. Their bodies would just fall in. He said the Jews told them that as some starved to death, they would throw themselves in with hopes of breaking their necks when they hit. The Germans knew the Allies were close. They locked the gate, took the food or poisoned it, and put dead bodies in the place they stored the water. He said the disease and infections were so bad that many of the soldiers in his unit were scared to help them. He told me that out of all the shit he had went through, that was the worst. It tore him apart. And he said those poor people would haunt his dreams. He felt like he didn't do enough. He felt like those times when they couldn't push the line forward that was just another day or another week. Those poor people had to be tortured. My great-grandfather was proud of his time in World War II. And he lived a great life. He died in 2011 at home in his bed watching his favorite show. Edit. I never expected this to blow up. I've posted about him before and never got a response like this. I am touched that so many people came to this comment and responded and read about my great-grandfather. However, I don't want people to know just this about him. My great-grandfather was a really good man. He was married for 60 years, and my great-grandmother passed 2 years after him. They had 12 children, and tried their best to make those around them happy. My great-grandfather wouldn't want any of you to be sad about what he went through. He was grateful for the opportunity to do something truly good for the world. However strong my own suffering is from experiencing what I can truly call hell on earth, I cannot fathom the eternal suffering the Jewish people have felt and will feel for generations to come. I am sorry for those that I could not save, and I am sorry for the times we had to retreat or fall back. I am sorry for the times we got pulled back to the rear. I knew of the atrocities your people faced, but until I saw them I had no idea. Do not feel sorry for me though. I am happy to suffer. I hope good things for your people's future. And I pray we all learn from this terrible war. He wrote this in a letter to one of the survivors from that camp. He couldn't bring himself to meet him in person and I didn't push him to. Thank you again to everyone. As for the museums, thank you everyone that gave a suggestion. I will be calling them tomorrow.